All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, hello, and welcome back. We're getting back
Guten
into
Tag.
some Guten Tag. How are you doing today, Mr. Schwabia?
Sehr gut.
Sehr good, sehr good. So this is yesterday did a bit of an OBS test stream. We've put a little content that's been pre-recorded. We're trying to get back into the live a little bit, and so today we're going to do an actual podcast for once, a little live show. We've got some fun discussion. We're going to talk kind of about the bigger questions, the metapolitics, the existential issues that have been raised this week. But before we get into that, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here with me. You are a fun person to do a podcast with, and I'll kick the ball off to you with this
Mm.
question that we were talking about briefly before on the air. Is that it feels like the transition between 2017 and today, to pick just a appropriate road mark, is that there once was a seat where there was some sort of driving agency in it, and now it feels very much like in the papal interregnum where it's a sede vacante, right? It is vacant, it is empty. So why don't you go ahead and just try to lead us off on that
Yeah,
thought?
well, to me, you want to talk symbols just right off the bat, Charlottesville, the tiki torches, those are not, that's not a classical torch. They're kind of silly. It looked artificial. They burned out. They whimpered. And then the attack happened. It was a very unfortunate event all around. Uh, and you talk about what precipitated an event like that was these anonymous boards, these private conversations, the underground side of the internet that wasn't giving up to certain fundamental opinions that in-group society tends to hold and holds itself together by when you look at the long term. And so, you had these events, you had these people that came to the fore and kind of sullied what you would consider to be a dissident right-wing movement, and they made quick work of it. I feel like early on in Trump's first term to really kind of mess it up and get everybody labeled as radicals when in fact people just don't want to see the destruction of their nation and the obviation of their people in the places that they grew up. And they see a lot of people changing their position on the map. And it's a fact, it's undeniable. So the concerns are real, and I guess one of the things we touched on before we hit record was that a lot of people are saying like the kind of conversations that are coming out now and getting to the front of X, and everybody, the news organizations are labeling it, oh my God, it's hate speech and everything is spiked and the end towers are building at $12,000 a pop on fundraisers and all of these silly things are happening. Uh, the those conversations that we're having now in the town square openly are the private conversations that were happening in 2017 and 2015 and 2012 before that. When Obama got in, that started happening on the underground internet. And before that, it was anti-war folks. When anti-war left completely abandoned itself, uh, around the time that Occupy Wall Street was converted into black bloc commies and all that kind of stuff, these conversations really pitched up, but they were beneath radar. Then, and as much as 4chan is a honeypot. That's where a lot of that stuff was incubated. They couldn't really control it. You can't really control it. And so now these rehashes of the conversations are coming up, but it's like the people who originally kind of messed the movement up. You got guys like Richard Spencer, who we touched on earlier, and is definitely worth necroing back into the current recording. He turned into a NAFO guy, and he's flying the blue and yellow flag on his X profile, and he definitely has some funny takes. But I mean, guys like him came through and really ruined a lot of stuff, and then you find out he's a turncoat later, and it's like, oh yes, of course, right, right, of
Well,
course he
okay,
was
let me
never.
hop in with a point on that, because I don't even think it benefits the conversation to bring up the individual, although I get where you're coming from, and I certainly understand the desire to necro him, as it were. But I think that, okay, so first of all, it is it's like a hobby horse and the biggest danger to bring up Charlottesville around anybody associated with this politics, because the most
Yeah,
common
right.
conversation is, what went wrong there and all of that. And as much as I don't even know that something did, like things happen for a reason. And sometimes the reason is the federal government. You never know, but like there is a really because it was this fascinating moment where the online activist side, and it wasn't just like one section. It was, I could name a few different sites, a few different groups, but they all came together. Unite the Right is what it was called. But it wasn't the Anons that caused any issues, besides
No.
obviously, James Fields and, Identity Europa issues and that kind of stuff. But like political prisoners are almost as much victims of the system as anything else. But the gatekeeping of it, and it's so Nick
Hmm.
Fuentes. I will bring up Fuentes specifically, because I think politically he's a bit more salient than Spencer, which I'm sure would eat Spencer alive.
Oh
But
yeah, no. Spencer only as a lesson in like how enfeebled some of these actors are in general.
well, I think they all are, right?
Fuentes is much more of like a hot button. People are he's still making new waves all the time.
But it's so that it's this grifter gatekeeper complex that sprung up. Um,
Yep.
there's a name I could say, I won't say, but you'd recognize it. And I heard them, and they're the kind of person who should be in the position of power where they could actually affect changes or try to escape the samsara of the situation. And the whole conversation that we had, just it was another one of these conversations about grifters and gatekeepers, where people they find a topic and then they pick the side, and you can't go any further or else you're the woke right, you're the enemy, you're cast into the outer darkness. And then there's the people who usually are able to monetize it, right? And I think that October 7th made it difficult for a lot of because I think a lot of that was very intentionally from the Israelis and from the British and trying to. I mean, that's another thing you can't talk about with this, but that has to be talked about is that there's this huge amount of foreign intelligence and even American intelligence services like deeply involved with this shit. That just make
Yeah.
it so impossible to function or get read. Giorgiani, Reza Giorgiani, the Persian, right?
This man single-handedly made me schizophrenic.
Yeah, and he's also running around with, these people and he's trying to organize it, but like, you can't go past a certain point. You can't be X, Y, and Z or it's not okay. And it's
Well, and he's got his little pet theory too. He's one of those perfect like well poisoning kind of things where it's like, oh, listen to my pet theory. It's like Ashton Forbes. He's got his little pet theory, and if you don't run with it, like Ashton Forbes doesn't care about aliens, like, and it's like, yeah, he looks like a little CIA bookworm, like,
all of the disclosure people. It's such an interesting parallel with the racial identitarian politics, nationalist populism or whatever we call it,
yeah,
and the UFO people.
yeah.
For sure, because what are the UFO people doing? They're selling you a product that will never come. What are the political identitarian people doing? They're selling a product that will never come.
Yeah, they both responded to a casting call by forces unknown, theoretically. So
Well, but
it's
okay, maybe the
it
casting call
pays.
was the situation, right? Like Fuentes was always destined to be just like some dweeb in the conservative machine, and then he goes to Charlottesville because he wasn't particularly intelligent or like understanding what it was going to be about, gets his life ruined.
Yeah.
He lies about going and getting into Auburn. He's got this plan after he gets kicked out of Boston College. Never goes anywhere, right? He had to lie about it, and it fell apart. And but there was a real animosity, and these people they called themselves the Irony Bros, and it was Beardson and some of the other like weird creeps with that. But they would be like hitters for Fuentes and the Groypers, and they'd go out and do like messed
Oh,
up stuff and hang out in discords with Baked Alaska all day and run operations on people and try to manipulate the conversation. And
yeah.
I don't know. It just makes me so frustrated because like the real work of politics to me is actual work, right? It's specifically it's shoe leather. It's door knocking. You want to win an election, you got to go knock a lot of doors. You got to make phone calls, you got to raise money, you got to go to the meetings, you got to ingratiate yourself, you got to be, like well represented in the community. And what we get is the opposite, where all of this effort goes into the project of a populist future or whatever it is. And the only ones that are successful seem to be the ones that are able to succeed despite, or, not leaning too heavily on it. Trump, he didn't need the external energy. He certainly tied himself to it, but he's managed an internal branding, an internal narrative which is separate away from that. And then, there's perception management to it, but like I don't know. I feel like I've lost the thread, and at the same time, I feel like this is such a big thread, it's hard to get lost in.
Uh, yeah. So it's yeah. You're sort of touching on a movement or an agenda being able to define itself clearly and continue to carry itself out, which is, uh, and I mentioned Occupy Wall Street earlier. We mentioned the dissident right. You could mention Trump won. In all of those cases, there was an agenda. There was a movement identity going on. They wanted the bankers to stop screwing people over. Then people were tired of uh, various things being imposed on us by commies, libs, etc. That have been degenerate to society. Then you had America first, and are we going to let it happen? And in all of those cases, the identity of the agenda got diluted out by characters inserting themselves in there and gatekeeping the process. And so at this point, one of the things that I guess I'll kind of round up that open thread I left, which is that right now we're rehashing publicly conversations that were happening privately like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and so it's sort of like the cat is out of the bag on that, and a lot of the people who now try to gatekeep are actually being pushed to the edge of the pond and are building up, and they're getting found out. The layers between them are shrinking. They don't have the same kind of following. Some of them were paid by U.S. aid indirectly. Um,
Cough, cough. The
and
Manhattan Institute cough.
yeah, and these people are being found out. Their business connections are being noted. Their histories are being posted in mega threads, and so they don't really control it anymore. Like what they're trying to sell is no longer being bought. Is easily gotten for free. Um, you know, like Yee's got a new track out, and that's all quite ridiculous. And so it's obviously mainstreamed that conversation. They don't control it anymore. People who purport to be gatekeepers are in a really, really weak position at this point. And all that really matters is you find out that they have a resume for doing such, and they start to lose their credibility. And people have just been deflating left and right doing this. So but they're not emblematic of the functional dissident right, that understands how to wield humor. However, your comment about not putting shoe leather to pavement and knocking on doors and trying to become delegates at various levels, actually participating in parliamentary process that builds up the nomination of government officials in places where you don't directly vote for it. That's a serious issue. We don't really. Elon Musk is potentially a Theo bro, and he's focused on certain things to get him off world because he's silly and has an insemination fetish. So, like, he's very busy and may help us occasionally and has done so a little bit recently, but he's busy. And when you talk about like we don't have a George Soros. You don't have somebody going, we need based district judges. We need based district attorneys. We don't have somebody stocking the shelves like that. Those that do are unreliable. Even the branding, oh, we got a MAGA candidate or something like that, that doesn't necessarily mean too much until you
Yeah,
look at
Lindsey Graham is
somebody's
a MAGA
past.
candidate. That doesn't do
Yeah,
anything.
and he's a maggot, and in every sense of the term that a liberal might use,
He's
maggot
another
really goes.
agate too.
Yeah, yeah, no, he's a total, yeah, no, he's absolutely. There's thousands upon thousands of types of agate stones actually, but yeah, no,
Which you should throw at him for the things that he does to children allegedly.
his
Sorry.
halitosis is legendary. People say that
Really?
his breath can stun you at a distance. Unlike Biden, who had the Alzheimer's in area of effect, so that you could just forget.
I
You
feel
didn't
like
realize.
all old people kind of smell a little bit. Like there's degrees to it,
Nonanol
but
nine is the chemical. You start producing additional nonanol nine, as you get older, and it builds up on your skin. It's this weird alcohol kind of substance that's very aromatic, and it smells like old people. But you can eat things that make it go away. Actually,
what the fuck, man? That's
I don't know what
that's
they
why I
are. I
like
imagine it's
talking to you.
probably
I
like
learn
pineapple or
random
something.
ass things. I feel like that's how people feel talking to me, but I get it from you. So you're like the dealer. I appreciate that. You're my weird fact dealer.
You need some facts. I got these facts right here.
I need to learn. Although, in fairness, like I don't know, you're probably like me where you go on Wikipedia when you're like bored or you can't like surf something fun and you're in the room. But So it's
Yeah,
all right. Let me wiki crawl.
if I have a question, I go ask it because I will talk out of my ass, so I better read.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let me. I've got a few notes here on stuff we were talking about. I just want to like
Yeah.
run through. So, uh, one of the things that is looking back on 2017 or that time frame to now is most interesting to me is the Nazi iconography, right? You talked about Kanye's song,
Yeah.
referencing, the Austrian painter. And what's so fascinating is okay when the war got hot in February of 2022 in Ukraine and the Russians actually did invade, despite everyone saying beforehand, oh, the Russians have invaded. But so when the Russians did actually invade, all of the major social media platforms went through and they changed their policies to allow for the glorification of the Third Reich and of extermination as kind of language because it had to be allowed against Russians or everyone would start getting banned. Um, and like that happened. Part of the reason why I have been so like this is not where I'm at right now is because the best people that I knew were getting actively recruited to go fight for Azov and Kraken and shit. And like
Whoa.
that's yeah, well that's what that's what a lot of the existence of the underground like we see it
Got
as
on
a
the wrong
vehicle
side of
to
the armband
political.
there.
Yeah, exactly. We saw it as like a vehicle to our political interest for our people, like reasonable, sustainable things. Some people see it for money, some people see it for ego. These people were creeps for the government. They needed ideological shock troopers for their neoliberal war against Russia, and like I get that, and it is what it is. But um, it's difficult, and I think that's why the anti-war thing has always been such an important because you can kind of almost sort through and I think more than anything, the uniting thread isn't even a racialist populism or anything. it is a genuine opposition to war.
Yep,
Um,
that
it,
is.
yeah,
That's the 90-10 issue.
yeah, and it's not like war itself. I mean, like I am not philosophically opposed to war, but I'm philosophically opposed to stupid wars. Like if you're going to pay a price in blood, I think that it needs to be like worth paying. Why would we pay
Yeah,
it in
and
the
I
Middle
can't
East?
think of one we're in or have been in any time in the last 150 years that wasn't a scam.
Okay, hang on, no, because now my autism is like, let me see here. Um,
The United States has
yeah,
basically been in all scam wars for the past 150 years, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. I mean, outside of the Mexican-American War, and
Yeah, that was
that's
a
outside your
territorial
time
dispute.
window.
I get some of the territorial. That's why like I wouldn't include the early
I would
colonial
say,
stuff.
okay,
It's like people were
Spanish-American, and I know
legitimately
that.
fighting over borders about stuff at different times, but most of that we've never been involved in legitimate fights. We were goaded into things under illegitimate guises or deliberately started something and pretended that the reasons were different.
Yeah, but look, the Philippines weren't going to take themselves, and the Spanish were weak.
Hey.
You know what? No, I'm gonna die on this hill.
And now, yeah, now and now you go there and they'll take your wallet when you go to the bar. So payback's a bitch and it's fine. Just don't go to the Philippines. And
Yeah,
it's like,
why
yeah,
would
we
I
fuck
go
the
there?
Philippines, but I'm not going there.
Yeah. No, you own them, but like don't visit. That's terrible. Let them. It's like American Samoa. I'm sure it's gorgeous there. I also don't really have any interest in going there, and that's part of America. Just
We gotta. I hope RFK Jr. stops shipping them high fructose corn syrup and spam. It's so bad for those people. It's not good for them. They have health problems from eating imported slop from us. It's really not good for those folks.
I find it interesting in football that Polynesians are considered to be like such an important ethnic group with it because they're like such
Yeah.
high performers or whatever.
Well, you can
Um,
like look at the wrestlers, like look at the guys in pro wrestling that were like the Samoans and stuff like that. They are uniformly bruisers, and they can produce some big boys. It's just you just gotta feed them right. It's like they're used to eating like coconuts and nice fruit and stuff like that, and you feed them spam and Dr. Pepper. The poor guy, like it's like no wonder he's 500 pounds. Like you got somebody who's trying to be 300 anyway. These are big people. But they make impressive. They just in the ring, just the work is incredible. They just look invincible, so they don't have to sell. It's great stuff when you're wrestling.
yeah. Although I keep thinking of the Tua Tagovailoa hit where he just kind of went retarded, and that like he'll be back supposedly, but we'll see. We'll see on that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I try not to be a hater, but he makes it easy. Anyway, circling back around, one of
Yep.
the other gatekeeping issues that seems to have been kind of a persistent problem is the Manhattan Institute and Thiel specifically. And people don't realize that everything is the payment processors, right? What's allowable is what won't get you kicked off of the payment processors. And,
Right.
historically, that was MasterCard and Visa. Visa controls like 85% of all credit card transactions in this country, but the blacklist is an industry blacklist that was maintained by MasterCard. Okay, so that's the basic part. Then you had Operation Choke Point 1 and 2, where Department of Justice said, okay, you're in the businesses of X, Y, and Z, right? Guns, gold, weed, pussy, all that stuff. Well, you can't have a bank account because that's too risky. And so they wouldn't make it illegal to do that because that's illegal itself. The whole thing is insane. But they would go to the banks and say it's too risky to bank with these kind of clients, right? And a good example of
Yeah.
it is them trying to debank the entire like actual gun industry, like Ruger,
Yeah.
right? Ruger can't get bank accounts because it was too dangerous under Joe Biden. But anyway, so that's choke point and choke point two and like the mainline banking system. But then you get to Stripe and PayPal. And that's what everyone uses these days for the most part, even if you don't
Yeah.
realize it. Most
Yeah. And you
e-commerce
get kicked off
backends,
of it.
yeah, are Stripe. And Stripe is very much PayPal derivative. It's a PayPal mafia company. Peter Thiel is on the board. Um, and Stripe is what controls the what's acceptable, right? When you hear, and I've listened to podcasts where they'll go on and on and on. Hey, well, we got to say it this way or we got to do it this way because we don't want to get kicked off the payment processor. And who they're referring to is Stripe. And I always kind of assumed it was like a relatively impersonal thing, but looking back on it, even just saying that sentence, I realized that there must have been conversations about what was acceptable policy-wise at a
Yeah.
higher, like a corporate level with some of these people, which is really, really intriguing to me because, of course, Thiel, associated with his buddy Paul Singer, right, is a big backer of the Manhattan Institute. The Manhattan Institute's played a really large role in trying to gatekeep and control the direction of narrative, especially within the right, and also figures that are allowable, right? They'll create figures, to the point where they think they can take a porn starlet and say, "Oh, look at you, you're so great, and we're going to make you into a conservative influencer because we have the ability to do that, and you have got a pretty face." But
Retread.
yeah, yeah, you just put some more tread on the tires, it's fine. Um,
No, you take a bald tire and an army knife, and then you cut new tread into the bald tire.
yeah, yeah, no,
That's what they've done.
yeah, 100%. And it's this whole ecosystem because it's the insidious informal influence, and they're trying to copy the leftist model somewhat ineffectively. But think of all of the podcasts and the magazines and the group chats that are like downstream of that money and influence and the figures from it. And you
Yeah.
realize that's a not insubstantial portion of the entire thing at this point, but it's downstream of the guy who's been trying to control. And also, I want to make a really important point here with Manhattan and Paul Singer is that it was right after the initial Trump election that you saw Paul Singer and Manhattan Institute go from like radically anti-Trump to we're going to be the edge face of new nationalist populism. And I don't think that it was a well-intentioned thing. I think that they had realized that there was a failure of the larger neoconservative Bush project, specifically Marco Rubio as like a successor to the Bush legacy,
Yep.
since Jeb couldn't do it. And when that happened,
Yeah,
because Rubio's
PNAC,
focus,
but basically PNAC guys that have had to keep reincorporating and taking new losses or whatever to write off their fucking failure
yep.
over and over.
And then when it failed, they were like, okay, we're just gonna put on the new face, and the
Yep.
new face is Manhattan, and Dimes Square probably would ring a bell. But like, I don't know,
Yep.
you could rant and rave, and maybe it's deservedly so, just to go off on these people, but the faces don't matter because how you break them is by de-emphasizing it, right? And okay, so one last point before I hand the mic back to you is that there's been this big effort on their part to destroy anyone who becomes a leader, right? You get into a leadership position, they'll use Palantir, they'll dig up your porn history, they'll blackmail you with whatever crimes you've committed or they invent. Um, whatever pressure tactic they can do. And if they can't do anything, then they'll still make stuff up. They'll bad jacket you. They'll smear you. They'll, harass you and threaten you with people that are like protected criminals by the state. The swatters, right? How is it with the NSA we can't capture the swatters? That's crazy. Um,
Yeah, right.
but by doing that, they've actually forced everything to evolve into a very leaderless state where it's effective as a leaderless thing. Usually, the issue with leaderless resistances is that because there's no like executive capability, it just becomes stagnant and dies. But there's been this real iterative jump that was only made possible with social media and the internet, where a decentralized political movement can not only survive but thrive and outperform any leader that's tied to it. So, like that to me is a really optimistic thing because that speaks to like a
They,
formative. Go ahead.
Palantir and the Manhattan Institute and OpenAI and Unit 8200 and lots of people who have private GitHub repos or they're working on stuff all wrestle with this problem of, and this is a psychological issue as much as it is a calculating issue. Uh, all the people that I just named are working on predictive systems to attack something we wield, which is emergent by necessity, because they keep trying to make everything that people put together is destined to be headless in their view, so that they can be the heads of things. And so like they try to build these predictive systems and figure out what the trend is and how to pace it, how to get ahead of it, how to stop it, how to move it, how to redirect it. And yeah, they're dealing with emergent things. And even right now in the AI research, they're dealing with the discoveries of emergent things, and they don't understand how it's happening fully. And people have their theories, but that's what they're wrestling with is emergent properties of societal upheaval, and so they're not really going to get beat on it all the way. Like the last mile functionality of that is unfortunately the margin between success and failure for them, and they're never going to buy it. It can't be purchased.
Could you maybe
So
go in a bit on how they use pacing to accomplish that? I think you brought that up, and I think that's a really important point. I'd love to hear you say more.
pacing is a fun one because it's like, well, if I just act like, all right, so you got a big issue. Uh, like we have somebody trying to pace the Shiloh Hendrix thing that I ran into earlier in the week, and he's like, uh, he's some hip hop enthusiast fella. I'm not going to drop his full at because I'm probably more polite than he would be, but uh, he got in a thread that I was in, and people were going off about Shiloh, and I forget the exact context, but basically he was trying to zero in on really what's not an actual fact of the case. I believe the child was 10 or 11 or perhaps 9. He was saying, "Oh, so you think it's okay to call a 5-year-old autistic child the N-word?" And that was what he was focused on, although there were a series of other facts. Now he's an opposition person that I just ran into, but he's trying to pace me by getting really incensed about some misconception really early in the game in terms of like what sets up this situation and tells you the story about who's right and wrong here. Do I have the full narrative in hand? Can I make my decision now? He wants to stop it. Like, we're 5% into it and he's already got something wrong and he's all pissed off. Similarly, when people look like they agree with you, and you come out and you're like, we have to deal with this immigration problem. And they'll find a million little ways to cut you off at the pass and talk about, like JD Vance's arguments that there's a certain ordering of your affectations that you should take in life. You defend your family first before you defend a neighbor, before you defend a foreigner or something, like, effectively. I'm not saying it verbatim, but people nitpick at things. They try to hit the brakes early on you. That's really the primary thing. They hit the brakes early on you, or they'll come up. People will pipe up and try to trend something by going like, aren't you so mad about XYZ? Share if you agree. And you see these people like trying to tell you what you're pissed off about this morning. Which when the left does it on The View, it's very obvious to people. But when certain people online encounter slop and they just read it silently, I think maybe they hear it in the voice in their own head, or perhaps they hear some commanding voice when they just read things silently. If you watch a person try to express that same thing to you, it's like, yeah, write it down is a good way to catch a gabber. But then when you see somebody who lies online all the time, they actually have sort of the advantage because it's flat text. You don't really understand who you're looking at. A lot of these people are so scuzzy if you watch them try to tell you what they're saying. Anyway,
No, you're absolutely. I mean, because part of it too is the Twitter monetization structure and all of social media at this point, where it's pay for engagement and what engages people, getting them angry and agreeing with them. And if you can find a way to do that over and over and over again, there's
if you
also a
tell people
popular.
what they're mad at, they'll never get to the core of it. If you could keep them dancing around the drain, they never go down. They never figure out what's at the bottom of the. And so that's the thing that they want to keep people dancing around the point instead of actually getting through to it and solving it. They don't want Spider-Man to kill the villain. They don't want the hero to win. They just want him to quest forever. And
Yeah.
that's the pacing. They want it's 2 more weeks is the idiotic version of it. Forgive my voice.
I'll just fill the dead air briefly. It makes me think of horror movies and why like horror movies don't actually work in America. You get these very long, intense, stressful situations, and it's just like, wait, if you had a gun, you could just end this problem right now. Like, what are you people fucking doing? And with this, right, people are more mad online than they've ever been, but there's less
Yep.
desire and less ability to try to actually fix these problems because the outrage is what's profitable. The solutions usually aren't because the solutions require like okay, I was talking with my wife last night. We were driving to some friends and we had a minute in the truck and the issue with Zionist power people are more aware of it than ever, right? You get random normies driving around singing Kanye's new song. You have people that are super outraged about Gaza to the point where they're happy to get deported for doing stupid stuff to protest it. But are we close to like actually breaking outside of, Trump having issues with Israel diplomatically and maybe there's a separation from the Netanyahu government, but you can just kind of see structurally we've seen the high watermark of Zionist power at least in its, most recent form from here on out, it's going to fade. Israel's economy is structurally screwed. Israel's demographics are, they're inverted. It's going to go in a bad way. There is not a good long-term play here. Whatever happens is going to be some sort of trying to satisfy a bunch of different things that you can't properly do. But at the same time, anyone who's like, you know what, now it's my time. I'm going to go out and I'm going to fight the Jew fight, and I'm going to be, God's greatest Jew hater, and I'm going to, smash him. That person's going to get fucking wrecked because Israel and the Zionist lobby still have a huge amount of power, right? They still have APAC, they still have nuclear weapons, they still have the Samson option, and so yes, structurally they're on the downhill. Long term, their survival is not guaranteed. But whoever decides to step into that fight is not going to walk away from it probably alive. It just is what it is. So it's a very difficult situation to say to people, you got to charge into that machine gun
You
nest.
gotta go constructivist. I think that's the problem. Is it's an application of critical theory. If you really want to be honest, it's an application of critical theory to come out and say that I'm anti-Zionist. That's not actually my bill of goods right off the bat. Although you could describe my views as such, you know. And if you come from a position of like this is what I'm for, this is what I'm for, this is what I'm for, you're not in the realm of this is what I'm against. Then they have to drag it out of you, and it puts them on a completely different footing rhetorically. And you have to have different principles of operation. It's again emergent stuff, and there's a measure of perennialism in terms of what people are trying to get back to. Like, there's certain things about society worked, and that's what's being reasserted here. And like some people need to get back on the other side of the wall, and that's that. And some walls need to come down that people are worshiping, and that's also that. And so at this point, the discrediting is at such a high level, and it's not abating. Uh, while you say that the power structure is there, it does feed off of its ability to intimidate. So as it loses that, it's going to lose relevancy. It's losing funding. They have airports shut down. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, just canceled his trip to Israel. I'm told late breaking, and so the deterioration of that continues for them. And the Houthis never agreed to stop striking Israel, so Israel better stop striking Gaza, and that's on them. And that's what people are going to continue realizing. All of this anti-Zionist rhetoric isn't really tantamount to another pogrom or some exhortation unto another Holocaust or something like that. Although people like to toss around the joke, and they do that, but really, if you just discredit people and run them flat broke for being war criminals and deathmongers in general and trying to enslave everybody, then they'll continue losing credibility, and ratings matter. Troll physics is the order of the day. The age of Aquarius does not care about the Piscean schooling of fish that they used to demand out of everybody with their silly little hats and all the things. We had 9,000 years of that silliness going on. And so it's over because it's out of style. and that's too bad for them. And it's not going to be as brutal as they wish it was because, again, it's another age. It's going to be a lot funnier than they wish it was. Which is going to be
Yep.
so agonizing.
Yep.
It's going to be so agonizing. They're already being laughed at. They hate it.
Yeah, the mockery is huge. A couple points I wanted to make off of what you brought up is that I think that the hiding of priorities is super important in like game theory decision making, right? If
Yep.
you don't know what I'm going for, I can work towards it, right? Like I play Connect 4 with my kid. That's the secret to Connect 4 is you don't look at the spot you want to play into. And so like today is Victory Day in the formerly Soviet side of the world. Yesterday was Victory Day in America because apparently we celebrate that now. But like World War II never ended. The fighting ended. There was a cessation of open hostilities. But World War II, if you look at it from the German perspective of the war, was a war between them and I don't even want to say Zionism, right? They said Judea, but the Germans were Zionists as much as anybody else. They just thought that Zion was in Madagascar, I guess. But like the idea that there needed to be this
Still
creation of
further away.
yeah. Well, if you look at Israel in the post World War II period, it was a creation of the United States and the Soviet Union, just as much as the International Space Station was. It was like this, the
Yeah.
superpowers that are having their Cold War get together to work on this project. So if you think about it, World War II, the real outcome, the real fight of World War II was the establishment of a Jewish state. And it didn't happen, cause and effect wasn't like bang bang. It was, a few years downstream, but that clearly was the outcome of it, right? Now there were parts of it, right, like the breaking of the colonial empires of Britain and France and the, preservation of the Soviet order, all that stuff. But the big thing, it was a Zionist project. And then the post-World War II world order, for all that it's to do American, Bretton Woods, all that, it's not. What it was a world order that would preserve Israel for whatever insane reason. Maybe it's justified. Maybe they really are talking to angels or something. But I find that so fascinating because here we are 80 years later to the day and the war is still like raging in people's heads. It's just it's not being openly shot out, but I think that and a lot of people don't recognize that they'll be full participants in it. And maybe that's just my own perceptual filter because that's what I want to see in it, which is fine. But the Shakespeare line, all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. Because it really does feel like there's just these roles that people can step into tomorrow. To get back to like the title, right? Sede Vacante, the seat is open. Tomorrow, somebody could say, I am the CEO of Racism Incorporated or whatever, and we're gonna get a political party. Here's our constitution, here's our manifesto, here's how we're gonna do it, here's our strategy to be successful over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And you know what I mean? It's like stepping into Avatar. It's like taking on these archetypal roles that pre-exist, which I find so fascinating because they don't go away, right? Just like the Pope is an avatar, right? When does the Pope have Avatar, put on him? Probably in the room or whatever, the Room of Tears, which is a terrible name for a room, but at what point do random shit posters or grifters or whatever, when do we step into Avatar? Because I feel like a lot of people, and perhaps our most powerful thing, and I'll stop with my rambling on this, but um, I feel like we see it on Twitter all the time. That's the easiest avatar for people to step into is like the culture warrior thing where they put out a good point and people are just like, okay, this is the role, this is the situation, this is how I act in it, and it's like a learned thing that didn't have to be taught, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Uh, people people need to take the next few years to actually make good on all the the rugged individual talk. That's gotta finish happening. You have sports like that are representative of it. Like UFC is very popular. That's mano a mano. Like two guys get in the ring and like that's it. They're trying to survive against each other. And so like that sort of individualism. It's also one of the most international sports. Two guys can come in and they got flags they're flying and people from those countries root for them. And so it's there's a trend going towards that where it's emergent movements, individuals acting. The tide is made of many bazillions of little water molecules, and it changes the beach, and so there's uh, there's something that's going on with that, but people need to make moves in their private life to prepare. prepare themselves to get out of the control of these systems, and some have done it already, and there's beginning to be a model for it. I don't think it would. I don't think you'd end up labeling it as an exodus or anything like that. It's just that you need to kind of drain. You need to drain the power out of the cities enough to like correct things, and it's all overblown. Like the coastal elite that are trying to control what's going on through these, through the auspices of these institutes and these opinion factories that they have, are also kind of city slickers and overblown about everything. And they think AI is a magic god, and they think they're going to control the future, and everybody's going to weaponize the robots, and space is going to be, like it's just another territory to establish naval control over, essentially. These are dunderheaded folks with a high IQ. They don't have wisdom. They're going to get outmaneuvered. We continue to miniaturize all kinds of things that make life convenient and possible and to create self-sufficiency with. So, uh, I don't know how to forecast stuff like that, and I don't know how to tell somebody like what the exact format of the movement should look like, because it's like, what do you do with that? Like, oh, I'm the CEO of racism, so they're gonna cut my head off and dox me, and all the things are gonna happen, and like I'll get found out. Like, well, that's kind of a silly move, and you might as well construct your values from another standpoint where it's like, I'm for people having some means of production of their own. Like, get a lathe and put it in your frickin' shed.
I've got my lathe
Oh, I
coming in
can
a
make
couple of
metal.
days. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
that's the kind of, it's like, cool. I have a little bit of a machine shop here.
Yeah.
That's owning the means of production. You want to talk about like things leftists want at the end of the day. They want chickens and cows. They want goats. They want a thing that they can turn wood with on their property. How is that any different from a right winger? I don't understand, like people who want to rent apartments are silly. People who need to go to the salon are silly. A lot of the influencers that are on the right are like these people where it's like they just got a headshot and some silly name that's gotten out. You got guys like DC Drano or something like that. He's a haircut. And then he goes and gets all these binders at the White House, and like he didn't do a fucking thing with them. And that's what these people are. I mean, ye shall know them by their fruits. He didn't do a fucking thing with the binders that he got. The binders aren't anything. And the files are still there. They're working on them. Does anybody really want to watch the Epstein, like the tapes? Do you really want to? You can't watch that stuff. What are you gonna do? Pixelate the whole thing? So it's, like there's stuff going on, and like the discrediting is also part of the reason that the enablement of more and more busts are coming up. And it's like people are tired, even in the context of oligarchy. The new oligarchy, even if it is Alex Karp and Peter Thiel and all the gay boys and Musk and the robo dicks and everything, it doesn't really matter, because like they're obviously tired of the old oligarchy's sloppy and perverse style of doing things. And somebody's cleaning them out. Like it's obvious that whatever's going on with the Trump axis, like it's very good to see him cutting ties with Israel, and we'll see what kind of maneuvers take place in terms of impeachment and other trumped up proceedings and lawfare that are probably naturally going to follow from cutting ties with Likud. But uh, yeah, so
I can
yeah,
hear
sorry,
your
I'm being told
handler in
to
the
talk about something.
background.
Well, I might be able to work it in. I'm thinking about it because I'm like, so yeah, and yeah, the population is they say we're desensitized, uh, but we're not, and people are turning away from the drink, and it used to rule our culture, and I mean, like I've said this before, I'll say it again. We need UK to really come up, Ireland to really come up, all the soccer hooligans to really come up. Those are the people. This is an emergent thing that I think should happen. You can't call for specific soccer hooligans to step up to the front, but the soccer hooligans have been coming out, and they need to come out. And those are the kind of people you're going to see emergent movements of like, oh yeah, wait a second, the silent majority is now loud, and they've been saying that, but they'll get louder. And like those people, a lot of them are doing psychedelics now instead. So I mean, you got the soccer hooligans, but they're a little bit more lit up these days. They're not just all drinking themselves to sleep. But I swear, if you cut the beer off in Europe,
See, I don't know soccer well enough to speak
If
to it
you
because some
cut the
of them
beer
seem
off in
based.
Europe, the hooligans will go off. I'm telling you. I know you're a football fan, but like in terms of
It's not a
football,
real sport.
like
Anyway.
if you cut that beer off in Europe, we need to create some kind of trade scenario or goad the
Oh,
EU
they're going that
somehow. I
way.
don't care if
No,
it
no,
appears on its face negative. We got to goad the EU into cutting the beer off. And then when the beer stops flowing, it's over for the new European Soviet. It's completely over. I'm telling you, those alcoholics that are remaining in Europe, because that's the reason Europe hasn't figured itself out yet. They're still drinking and happy. They got to quit drinking.
I
They
think it's
got to.
coming. I
They're
mean,
going to be,
financially, the price of energy will be like dictating that a lot, and it's just not going to be competitive for them, even with oil being what it is. But you had some really, really good
yeah,
points, and I want to try to work back through a couple of them because I've been writing down notes on my little whiteboard. But uh, the ability for people to participate in this, and I think that one of the hardest lines that we'll have to put out there, frankly, is going to be that people need to be self-actualized before they can be in a leadership role, right? One of the greatest critiques of Nick Fuentes is that he doesn't have a real job, right? People who
yep,
don't work real jobs don't have the life experiences that are necessary to succeed in leadership roles. Teddy Roosevelt in his Citizenship in a Republic speech that he gave in France talked a lot about this, that people shouldn't be involved in politics until they've kind of got like the inner life sorted out. And I
yep,
don't know that you need to like have a hard line of, you have to have 2.5 kids and you got to own your property and have a machine shop or whatever. But there should kind of be this expectation of if you're stepping into a role saying, I want to be entrusted with the future of it, I want to be entrusted to be a leader or a guiding figure, that I am squared away. And if you come digging, not that you're invited to, but you're not going to find a bunch of weird, terrible things that compromise me, right? Like that should be an expectation. If you don't fit it, it's not a personal aspersion. It's just maybe
yeah.
that's not the role for you. Maybe there's a better role for you because a lot of people came into things, I think, through like the manosphere because either they lacked a father figure or they felt unconfident as one, and this like seeking for a great father in the politics. And then the people that they've been getting lessons from are, are childless weirdos, are divorced, are
Yep.
deeply unhappy figures. Not all of them, but like there is definitely a truth to the liberal criticism of things is like the divorced dad movement. When you got Kanye West and Elon Musk and Richard Spencer all kind of singing from the same hymnal, um, maybe that's not a good hymnal to read from. Just, and I'm not saying that like any particular part of it, but I did want to bring it back around because the idea that personally I like the best in terms of leadership structure, which is probably never like gonna work, but that it should be really participatory. Like at the end of the day, I'm a Republican in the like the term sense, not the American sense, but that things should be managed kind of as a republic where there's a formalism, there's a legalism, and it's very participatory, right? Like if you want to be involved in the thing, it should be, well, here's how you get into it, and here's what the expectations are if you're going to be in a leadership role, and here's what you're going to be doing, and here's the support that you'll get. But also that, like specifically, if you're making a nation within a nation, there's got to be a decision-making mechanism in there that's binding, even if it's not like policy making, right? So to get everybody on the same page where everyone agrees, I might have a different take on this. I am bought in. With Vladimir Ilyich Lenin in a book I think he wrote in 1905, called What Is to Be Done, talked about it a lot because he was dealing with the Mensheviks, and it's the same kind of thing, right? They were a similar flavor. Both of them have these goals of taking over the state, but one was a much more serious, much more militant side, and one was much more like engaged in trying to do the retail politics of it. And
Right.
how you manage that and how you manage the like the role of because the big power is the hoi polloi, right? It's the just the average people that listen to the podcast or get involved, share the memes or just talk about it in person, right? That's where the real power lies. It's not in I've got so many followers on some social media, I've got so much money, I know so and so in the White House, because all of those things are fleeting. It's the people that are the power in it. And I feel like that's also why there's been such an effort to scare people out of being associated with it, right? If you get involved with this, you'll be a dangerous neo-Nazi and banned from polite society and debanked and all that shit because they don't want people to feel safe. Like if you say I'm a
Well, that
Republican or
makes
I'm
money
a
now.
yeah, go ahead talk about it. I've been going.
That makes money now. The troll physics have kicked in. So, like, I mean, if they attack the payment processor for the Shiloh fundraiser, for instance, there's going to be an even bigger backlash. So, Like it makes money now. If you want to really cause problems and try to dox somebody, it tends to backfire at this point. They're getting to that Wile E. Coyote stage with all their devices, where they just send a it's just total blowback and they end up with a charred face about it. So I mean, it's fine. They can try that. I don't think it's gonna continue getting worse and worse every time they do it.
I feel like we can trade with them at a really unfavorable like ratio and still win because so much of
Yeah.
their power, because their threat is real, right? There's a bite behind the bark, but a lot of it is, the threat of what they could possibly do, so they don't have to enact it. Because if they had to do it all of the time, constantly, right, it would just be this
Yeah.
massive drain on everything.
Yeah, that's what's great about the mob is it's just like if you can just cause an overwhelm of the system, then they can't do anything. Like when the police in UK started taking reports of online posts that were offensive, and then people started using their VPNs to log in the area and start posting. So they were trying to trace local IPs from people who were all over the world trolling in England because they said you can't post mean stuff online. And it's like they shut it down after like 2 or 3 days because they were completely overwhelmed with reports and they couldn't even be bothered to enforce them all. And it's like, yeah, if you want to enact some law that says you literally have to process this, and then we overwhelm the system, it's like you're gonna get gamed. You're gonna if an Indian guy can make 15 alt Twitter accounts and get himself up to 100,000 followers or whatever, have a cell phone wall and run a scam. People are gonna get gamed for doing their dumb stuff, and like it's gonna happen, and it's been happening. So I mean, like I said, the $12,000 N tower is a prime example of like you're gonna get gamed. Don't try it anymore.
I think it also speaks to the fact that we have a lot deeper pockets than people realize. Because for years there's been this
Yeah.
media complex that caters to us without being willing to accept our shibboleths. And I think that they've realized that, the normie audiences, I don't want to say are fully tapped out, but they're kind of checked out. There's
Yeah.
only so much
Yeah.
fundraising you can do on that. But with our stuff, there's a huge amount of people who would love to give money to a good cause who've just never had a good enough cause or who, have been trying and, they're donating to what they think are good groups and they're just working where they can, right? Like, I'm not saying to take the money from them, but Gun Owners of America is a great example of these like adjacent interest groups that are definitely catering towards a certain thing, but that don't do it explicitly. The immigration lobby, there's a few of them that are decent. But like we need something more hardcore. We need something more direct and about what it's about. Um,
Yeah.
and the money would be there if somebody were to put together the structure for it and the messaging. And it's got to be clean and professional. You can't just have a trailer park fly by night thing. But that's I don't know. That's what'll end up happening if they don't. If it's not nature abhors a vacuum, and there's just this massive vacuum right now that we can all kind of feel the pull of. And I think everybody with, a good mind in their head is trying to swim desperately against the undercurrent because they don't want to be necessarily sucked into that because it's a
Well, and
bum
I
trip.
think And I think what all the recent stuff's proving online is that like, the institutes are getting sniffed out and every time there's a new shill, they get their resume dumped and on all that stuff. So people get found out. So one thing that I think is interesting about this vacuum is that you can't fill it with a fake. It's not
Expand on
working.
that. Yeah.
They've been trying to fill this sort of like rhetoric vacuum with an applicable fake, and none of them last long. And so you have these figures like who is James Lindsay and how dare he try to direct the conversation with his little forget him. And like people like this are cropping up every week and getting shot down every week. And like they're trying to pump them out. And they're trying to, like who's next up out of Manhattan Institute? Like we're gonna knock them down too. It doesn't matter. These people are all fake. You see what Meta does with some of these people. I mean, him and like Basil, they have ridiculous histories. And then like God forbid you've been rubbing too many elbows and Milo knows something about you. Game over. So it's not working for them. And every time they try to like astroturf this little area that they haven't conquered, it doesn't work.
It really does feel like the Iraq War in some senses, right? Like they're trying to do all these different counterinsurgency strategies, but
Yeah.
big picture, they've changed up tacks so much, it's clear that none of them are working and they're getting diminishing returns.
Yeah, no, it's a quagmire for them indeed. They would do best to stand down and let people conduct,
Let us
but
fail on our
they
own.
can't
We will
stand it.
fuck it up, I promise you. I
They can't
promise you.
stand it. These steel bros they need to cop a fresh 10 strip and do it all at once and just sit down and be quiet somewhere. I know some of them have dropped, but I bet you they only dabbled. Do they need to go all the way and
I
just
don't buy
realize
that
how
there's
tiny
even
they
real
are?
LSD anymore. No, LSD is a myth. It's like the Easter Bunny. You can't find the real stuff. It's not there anymore. The CIA stopped selling the good stuff. Now it's all research chemical bullshit. But see, if you put the
Yeah,
tab on your tongue, it
if
wakes
you
you
want to
up.
enter that in, if you want to enter that into the record, yeah, sure, you can. Yeah, I'll vote in favor of you entering that into the record. Sure.
Look, yeah, reasonable people can disagree on a public live stream.
Yeah.
I do want to actually go back to you brought up James Lindsay, and we're getting on to an hour. I don't know that I want to go past it, so maybe let's try to close it up on a point on the woke right, if that's good with you. But yeah, so James Lindsay is I love him, honestly. I am the biggest James Lindsay fan. I used to listen to him back before he even talked about politics because he would talk about Gnosticism and he was so bad. Like it was Gnostic propaganda. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
that it's like I don't know what this guy's talking about, but it makes me want to be that. I want to be this guy's nightmare. And as he's gotten into the politics of it more and more, um, it's honestly been really informative to me because I think that the religion side of it uh, is important. And I don't know that it's like, we've got to be this or we've got to be that, but there does need to be an appreciation that there is a supernatural element to it, that there's this like larger consciousness to it, and that, there there's something that like there's a reason that the Catholic Church election mattered yesterday, even not it being Catholics, right? There is a point to all of that, but that we're being categorized as the woke, right? Um, it's almost like this vindication of the threat that we really do possess, because if we weren't an existential threat to everything that they were about, then they wouldn't need to go through such efforts to create and apply a label that's kind of silly.
Yeah, it's not an accurate label, but it does constitute an official nod, so that's flattering, but they can still screw off.
I mean, you woke up this morning. You are woke. You are awoke.
Yeah.
I'm awoke here.
No, I almost made that joke probably 40 minutes ago somewhere on here, but I thought it would be cringe, and it's still cringe now. So I'm glad I didn't,
Lean in
but I'm
on the
glad you did.
cringe. Don't be afraid of the cringe. No, 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 no.
No,
You
no
can't be
hogging all of
afraid
it.
of making a
You're
bad
hogging
joke.
all the cringe.
Yeah,
Oh,
100%. I'm cringe maxing, bro.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. God damn.
Well,
All right.
thanks.
Yeah, I don't even know where we were going with it. Make a good point, and then we'll call it on that. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The seat is vacant. You can't fill it with a fake. We're proving that every week. So, like, it's probably our move. I think, like you could say your move, creep. No, I think it's ours. We just gotta come up with some funny points that we can really get behind. I feel like they're constructivist about our views because everybody already knows what we're against, and that's stuff you can't campaign on. You
Yeah.
don't campaign on what you're against.
No, that's a fair point. I mean, what am I for? I don't even know
So,
what I'm for anymore. I'm for like
so
us surviving.
there's there's men who are much wiser than I that are talking in constructive fashion, and really lay it out. But that's the kind of stuff I believe in, and people should just always like ideas that come to us every day are precious. So write it down. Everybody should take notes, even if you don't look at them. Just write the damn thing down. You're going to remember it a little better. And because there's a lot of ideas we need to have about how to restructure society and what we're going to do in the middle, especially if things get a little bit more heated and an attempt to restructure causes people to get cut off. We have to have systems for people being a good safety net for each other. Like if you can't borrow a cup of sugar, you got to figure that out.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good point, right? As much as the negative, it sells and it drives engagement and it gets people to, yeah, I'm all about it. Um, it's the
No,
positive that
that's how you
lasts.
discredit folks, and we've got really good discrediting game, and everybody should keep that up. Throw tomatoes, throw them hard, throw plenty, throw them rotten if you got it. Uh, but when it comes to like what do we do next, that has to be in a constructivist fashion, and the banner has to be not created out of the photo negative of the things we hate.
Yeah, we're not an
If you
anti-Zionist
want to
movement.
classify things as hate, I really just detest certain behaviors, and people could stop them at any time, but it appears they don't want to. So I detest them. But yeah, if I'm not going to create my views out of the photo negative of those people. That's the other thing. My views don't have anything to do with that. I consider their views alien and they shouldn't have been conceived in the first place. That's my thought. So I come from where I'm coming from about what I like and what I want and what I want to see and how I would like to better the world, even in the case that the things I steward over aren't directly mine to affect or to have.
Really well put. I want to wrap up by just saying thank you for spending an hour and like,
No.
yeah, no, this is because here's the thing is I've been doing this on and off for longer than I want to admit, and I'm always struck by not being the smartest person in the room on a lot of this stuff, because that's a
Well, I
good
don't know who
feeling.
that is.
Yeah, well, no, but that's a good feeling, right? To step in and be like, you know what, I feel like I've got good ideas with it, but it's very easy to expand and find out that the person in the in the trench hole next to me, the foxhole next to me, is just as into it and thinking and trying to push it forward. And it's not just you, although certainly you're a great case of it because and I'm sure you can speak to it as well. There's so many incredible people out there. So I think it's always important to end on a hope spot because it is, we have to stay optimistic. Otherwise, it'll be a self-fulfilling negative
Yeah,
prophecy.
the bad news goes in the middle. You got to start off friendly. If you got bad news, you deliver in the middle. You finish on a good note. You never do that to people.
Yeah, yeah, and so the good news is that we get the best people. We got it, but we have this incredibly as you keep saying emergent thing that we are not just adjacent to but a part of, and that it's downstream of what we're doing. We are blessed that we can see that there is a link between our cause and the effect in the world, even if our cause seems to be very small and out of proportion to the effect. So, with that, Neuschwabia, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending an hour with me and getting into some of these
Yeah, of
topics.
course.
Follow this man on Twitter. His link is in the description below. I don't know if we'll be doing something tomorrow. I have plans. It's the weekend. But if not, I will be back next week. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, share this video, and yeah, have a great day.